This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. Welcome to the show.
This is American Real TV,
There's so much to talk to you about.
where everyone
You are a true inspiration.
has
We're all trying to do our part to change the world.
a story.
What's your mission? What do you want your legacy to be? You have such a great story. I cannot wait to share it. Welcome to the American Real family. I cannot wait to air this episode.
And now, here's your host, Roger Brooks.
In an era characterized by the relentless pursuit of immediate satisfaction, the digital world has drastically shortened our attention spans and has amplified our desires for instant rewards. A term called delayed gratification is a concept deeply rooted in our psychological makeup. And in an American culture that values speed over depth and immediate pleasure over lasting fulfillment, this philosophical approach is not only increasingly overlooked, it is often ignored. Through a meticulously curated blend of a lifetime of practice and research, philosophical insights, and transformative real-life stories, today's guest, Dr. Emilio Justo, sheds light on how the intentional act of pausing can serve as a powerful catalyst for growth. In essence, it's a place where instant gratification goes back to school and into a retoolment period whereby it resurfaces to the world in an entirely new way. In his new best-selling book, The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, Dr. Justo invites his readers on an introspective journey, challenging them to recalibrate their internal compasses and align their actions with their most profound aspirations. Once mastered, this newfound skill promises to unlock unparalleled levels of personal and professional achievement. Dr. Justo's life story is an inspiration. He was born in Cuba and fled as a refugee with his parents to the US, overcoming poverty and discrimination, and has achieved super success as an eye physician, cosmetic surgeon, two-time international TEDx speaker, best-selling author, master teacher, and visionary. Dr. Justo, welcome.
Thanks so much, Roger. It's really a sincere honor and privilege to be speaking with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. And what I love is to be able to hold this book right here and now because it came out so nice, and I know how much hard work you put into it. So congratulations for getting it out. Congratulations on it becoming a bestseller. We'll get into the book itself a lot more here in a little bit, but first wanted to just say kudos to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your support, and actually for writing the foreword to the book. It was very touching, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, and having the opportunity to work with you for some time gave me, I think a level of insight that I was able to do so. So, it was a pleasure to be able to provide the forward. But yeah, so let's start with your story and background, as it is quite unique. I mentioned it in the intro about a little bit about your history, that you and your parents came here from Cuba, but give us more of that backstory and how what it was like growing up, and then how you were able to persevere to get all the way to where you are today.
Yeah, it's a question that I commonly get asked. It doesn't have a simple answer. Part of the answer is that it's really just my life. I mean, I don't know any better. I don't think my life is much different than other people's lives, although perhaps some may say that it is. But basically, I was born in Cuba, and I'm an only child. My parents and I fled Cuba when I was 3. We were able to leave actually through Mexico. The reason for that is that when Castro took over Cuba, one of the first things that he did was he had the people there in Cuba actually go to their banks to turn in their currency for a new currency that Castro had established. Of course, the new currency did not have much value because he wanted the old currency. And my father never trusted Castro from the beginning, and so he buried his money in the backyard and never followed those guidelines. So later, it turns out that using that old money that had value, my father had befriended a Canadian diplomat and was able to get tickets out of Cuba through this Canadian diplomat via Mexico. And so we fled to Mexico and then stayed there for 6 months with nothing. All we could flee with is just the clothes on our back. I mean, we were not able to take any personal belongings. And then at that time, back in the mid 60s, it was quite common that because there were many Cuban refugees coming to the United States, that many church organizations were sponsoring families to come in. And we were sponsored by Central Christian Church in Gary, Indiana. Many of you know Gary from the Jackson Five and all of that.
Oh,
And
yes.
so that's where we actually went to. So unlike so many Cubans that come in through Miami, we were not one of them. So we actually went to Gary, Indiana. And there in Gary, my father worked two full-time jobs. He worked for the church who sponsored us as a maintenance and janitor person. And then he had a full-time job at U.S. Steel there in Gary. And then my mother, who in Cuba had her doctorate in education, of course, coming from a communist country, your credentials, your degrees don't transfer. So she went south to Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is located, to restudy in a second language, which was not her language, obviously. And so by that point, my grandparents were able to come over separately, and a different church sponsored them, Tarkio Presbyterian Church in Tarkio, Missouri, which was at the time a very, very small Presbyterian-based college in northwest corner of Missouri. And so my parents sent me to grow up with my grandparents, and we lived in one of the college dorms. So it was a fantastic experience. So I grew up from basically kindergarten through the end of fourth grade in Tarkio, Missouri, with my grandparents, while my parents were in Indiana. My mother was studying, my father working two jobs, trying to save up. And then by fifth grade, my parents had gotten established enough, my father had saved enough that he could buy his first home, or his only home. And so I moved to Indiana in fifth grade. We moved south of Gary to a little town called Crown Point, and the rest is history. Then growing up in those years, I mean, I must say, even through the so-called poverty and feeling a little bit maybe as an outcast with parents who had broken English, heavy accents, grandparents the same way. My grandmother growing up in Tarkio didn't know but maybe one or two words of English. Um, but still, as I look back, I mean, I just had the most phenomenal childhood and the most phenomenal upbringing that I would never trade it for anything. And this whole delayed gratification concept is one that uh, I really didn't start thinking about until maybe late high school or the college years, because it was just part of my life. I didn't know any better. But in school, being from an immigrant family, the immigrant mentality is always education first. And so my parents always placed a high belief in education. They encouraged me. They weren't one of these hardcore families that said, "Oh my gosh, if you don't get an A, I'm going to whip your butt," or something like that. No, no, it wasn't like that. They were just very encouraging, and they were always very positive, always very loving and nurturing. And really, the reason, as they've told me time and time again, growing up, that I was an only child, or am an only child, is simply because they felt that because they didn't have the financial resources, they didn't want to have multiple children and have to stretch their very, very limited resources, with a wide net. They wanted to really devote what they could to me. So they sent me to parochial school starting in junior high. I went to public school and grade school, and then St. Mary's Junior High in Crown Point, then Andrean High School, which is a Catholic high school in high school. And I worked very, very hard. I even have always told all my friends that growing up in high school, I worked the hardest ever, harder than medical school. And as such, I was blessed to become valedictorian of our high school, not because that was my goal. It's embarrassing to say, but I will share with you and your audience that I did not even know what the term valedictorian meant until maybe my final semester of high school.
Okay.
I was doing so well, and people around me would say, "Hey, there's a chance you might become valedictorian." I'm like, "What is that?" And so basically, I became valedictorian of my high school. That opened up other opportunities, even though in Indiana, there's a small all-male prep college in southern Indiana called Wabash College that is a very powerful little college that sends students to the Ivies, et cetera, et cetera. And I was the one person that year given the Eli Lilly Scholarship, which is a 4-year full ride scholarship there to Wabash. However, shortly thereafter, I was accepted. I was one of 10 nationwide applicants accepted into the University of Michigan's pre-medical medical program, which I would have to pay for, but the trade-off is that it was an accelerated program. It offered me immediate acceptance into medical school after high school. I could complete my studies in 6 years instead of 8 years.
Wow.
And so my parents said to me, they said, "Look, it's your choice. If you go to Wabash, we don't have to pay help defray your tuition costs. We'll try and put some money together and buy you a car if you like, or you can go to University of Michigan. We'll put in what you can as far as tuition. You have to get student loans. There won't be a car, obviously, et cetera. But I chose University of Michigan, and I've never looked back. So I finished medical school when I was 23, which is very, very young. Most people are just finishing college around that time. And then I did my 4 years of residency in ophthalmology in Washington, D.C. And then at the age of 27, I started my own private practice as I moved to sunny Phoenix, Arizona, where I've been now for 35 plus years.
Just amazing, just remarkable. And, there's so much in there. First of all, that your parents had the insight to send you away so they could take care of themselves early on with your grandparents. And then the fact that they only had one child, to have that insight back then is pretty remarkable. The fact that you were able to really, put your head down and work really hard, despite your circumstances, financially or whatever. It's just remarkable. And I think your story is one that people need to hear because a lot of times, if uh, you know, if students are disadvantaged in one way or the other, especially financially, it might be a bit harder to concentrate and focus on your studies. And the fact that it didn't seem to phase you and you just plowed right through it. So many great things came out on the other side. So just remarkable
Yeah.
how looking back, connecting all those dots.
Right. And again, as I said earlier, I really didn't know any better. I didn't think growing up that I was any different than anyone else, really, in a sense. I mean, even though I on a conscious level, of course, I knew that I was, but I don't know. I think I was just blessed to have great, loving, nurturing people around me. Um, Although certainly I've made many errors in my life, but I think at that point in my life, my head for the most part was screwed on properly. I did have a brief period of time there because, as with the stereotype goes, as with most Cubans, right, we tend to be very good at baseball, right? The Cubans and the
Yes.
Dominican, and and baseball was my passion, and I excelled at it, and I was a pitcher. And at one point, I really sat down and was telling my parents, "Gosh, I really want to try and see if I can make it into the major leagues." And they sat me down one day. One of their best friends that had befriended my mother and helped her in her studies, we all sat down and kind of had a heart to heart. And they said to me, "Look, you're good at baseball, but statistically, if you just look at the statistics, the chances of you becoming a Major League Baseball player is statistically very low. Whereas if you continue pursuing the educational path, the chances of you becoming successful are much higher. And I digested it, and I wasn't what I wanted perhaps, but I made kind of that rational decision, and I took the education path. As it turns out, one of my uh, fellow teammates in high school, Dan Plezak is his name. He actually did become a Major League Baseball player,
Wow.
and was in the major leagues for a number of years. And so I always think back and think, gosh, if he made it, I think I could have made it. But anyhow, life's been good. I've been very blessed. I have no complaints, and here we are.
Yeah, just remarkable. And look, you work full time as a surgeon and a medical director, I believe, of 2 or 3 locations. And I guess my question is, why are you moving in this other direction, doing additional things like being a TEDx speaker and now becoming a new author? What's tugging at you that you're doing that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that question quite often. I even question myself with that very same question. And truly, I think what it's been is, again, going along the concept of delayed gratification in another sense. Throughout my 35 years of practice, I really have devoted myself to medicine, which I love and I still love, and to surgery. But I put aside some of these other passions and some of these other thoughts that I thought, oh, I'd like to do someday. And I really devoted myself just to medicine, and perhaps too much. That may have been a small mistake in my life. Maybe I should have done more things, but I made so many errors, starting so young in the business world, not knowing anything, having not a single business class or financial class or anything that I ever took in college. It was all new for me. I was just thrown into the fire at the age of 27. And in the first half of my career, professional career, I made some good decisions and I made some really bad decisions. The second half of my career is when I really excelled and I learned from my mistakes. I embraced those mistakes. And as my wife repeatedly tells me, that I made lemonade out of all the lemons that I was dealt. Um, so finally, I just got to a point in my life that now that my wife and I have 3 wonderful children who are growing up quickly, a 19-year-old and 17-year-old boys, and then an almost 13-year-old girl. She'll be 13 here in a couple weeks. Um, I start thinking about life and mortality, and how many years am I going to be on this earth? And I really want to just accomplish some other things. I mean, I think I've accomplished what I have been able to in medicine. I mean, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. Could I have done even greater things? Perhaps, but certainly I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. And so I started thinking, especially raising our kids, it's been probably the biggest challenge in my life is not really fully realizing how difficult in today's society it is raising teenagers in particular.
Yeah.
And so this whole concept of the delayed gratification really started hitting me, because our kids, especially our boys who are teenagers, it's all about instant gratification. And I try and talk to them and explain to them, and, they nod their head and they seemingly agree, but in reality, they don't, because I see their actions and I see what they say. And so they just don't get it. They just don't get it. So as a result, I first decided to venture in the way of the TEDx stage.
Yeah.
And that happened purely by, in a sense, just by luck. Here's the short story. Basically, I was on my stationary bike, and I was kind of Googling and YouTubing as I'm on my bike, and this like little infomercial pops up, just like it did. I will say to the folks out there, just like it did. That's how I found Roger, the exact same way.
That's
And I'm very blessed to have you in my life, and I appreciate again all your efforts. But I came across this organization that helps individuals go through the TEDx process. helps them design a talk, helps them go through the nuts and bolts of the application process, which is extremely extensive. And so I went through this process, and this organization said on average, every 90 applications, it takes 90 applications to land one TEDx talk on average. And so, so I started applying, and this was around maybe late March, early April of 2023. And I had just finished submitting my 86th application, like within about a 2-month window of time. I was devoting every weekend to doing this because during the work week, I have no time. And then my family and I took our annual summer vacation. We were in Canada, and we were sitting having lunch in Banff, Alberta, Canada.
Sure.
And here it is, July 5th. I get a phone call as we're having lunch, and it's inviting me to speak at TEDx Cherry Creek HS, which is outside of Denver, on August 12th. So it's 5 weeks away, but we still have another week of vacation to go. And the way this process works, the way it was taught by this organization, is you don't write your talk in advance. You just outline it and bullet point it to apply. So I hadn't written my talk. So I get home from our Canada vacation, and I have exactly 4 weeks to write the talk, practice the talk, memorize the talk, and then deliver the talk.
Wow.
And so I delivered the talk August 12th. The video came out very quick because the TED organization can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months to publish the video. It came out about 5 weeks later. And here it is now, August. We're like, 7, 8 months into it. And it's now exceeded over 6 million views. But even prior to that, I saw the momentum that it was gaining, and that's what started me thinking, hey, maybe I need to write a book about this and see if I can expand upon the concepts, which I started to do with you and your organization. And then as I'm doing that, I also thought, I need to do another TEDx talk on a slightly different topic on obsession, on the obsession advantage to unprecedented success. So so now I kind of knew the system a little bit, so I was more targeted. I only sent out one application, and within like 3 weeks, they did Zoom interviews on me, and then they accepted me. And then February of this year, I delivered that in Ontario, Canada. And that talk has really taken off. It's only been out on YouTube now for a couple of months, and it already has well over 400,000 views.
So let me ask you, I mean, I look at a lot of TEDx talks, and a majority of them do not have that kind of traction that I'm aware of. And I would ask, what do you attribute that kind of success to? Why is it getting so many views? Is it the topic? Is it
Yeah, that's a great question, because I really didn't know that much about the whole views, and I'm honestly, I'm not even that much of a YouTuber. So I'm kind of learning as I go. But one of the things I have been recently paying attention to, particularly more so now in this second talk, because I'm thinking, wow, okay, maybe the first talk, yeah, maybe it's just I was that 1 in a million person, I got lucky, what have you. But now on this second talk, I've actually been going to YouTube, and when you go to the talk, there are comments, right, that people can leave.
Sure.
And then of course there are likes, they hit the like button. And I'm really going through and I'm reading the comments. And I mean, there's just tons of comments, and I'm replying to each of them as best I can. It's hard keeping up with all of them, but I'm replying to them. And it's just incredible to hear the comments. The comments, have to do with, hey, what a relevant topic, or like the obsession people were commenting on. It's great to flip this obsession to a positive connotation rather than a negative connotation. Thanks for sharing this. Thanks for enlightening us. I mean, I'm really proud that it's resonating with people. with the first talk, yeah, I read some of the comments, but again, I didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of let it slide. But now I'm paying really close attention to see what people are saying, and it really touches my heart. I mean, it really does. I see these comments and I feel like I'm replying to them. I don't know if they're seeing my replies, but I almost wish I could reach across the screen and shake their hand or give them a hug, because I feel a bond. I feel a bond with many of these people.
That's remarkable. And I have a feeling this won't be your last TEDx talk either.
Probably not. Yeah, no, I mean, I really have the itch right now. I just, I'm so busy with so many things currently that I haven't really sat down to formulate my ideas. But hopefully within the next year, I'll put together another one.
That's great. That's great. Let's dive into the topic a bit more and the content of your book. There's just a few things I'd like to point out if you could provide some feedback. So the first thing is from chapter 1. It's titled "The Nature of Delayed Gratification," and I'd just like to read the first paragraph because I think it sets the book up quite well. The concept of delayed gratification emerges not merely as a product of modern psychology or strategy for success. Instead, it is deeply woven into the very fabric of our DNA, a legacy passed down through the millennia by our ancestors. These early humans, as cave-dwelling hunters and gatherers, pioneered the path to survival by mastering the art of patience. And that got me to thinking, like, okay, from the beginning, we needed to have patience in order to survive. And just curious why you started there. Is it the most rudimentary way of thinking about this from our evolution? And I guess bring us through that, why you did decide to start there.
Yeah, great question. And yes, I think it is the most rudimentary thing, because when you think back at civilization, right, we had to be patient. We had to hunt for our food. It wasn't just sitting there the way it is now, where you open your refrigerator door and you have all this food just sitting there waiting to be cooked or heated in a microwave. I mean, you had to really hunt for the food. But the honest answer, the reason I started there is because of my beautiful wife, because she was the one who told me, and I'll mention her name because she doesn't get enough. She's been a tremendous sounding board for me. Dr. Allison Justo, she is her doctorate in education. She's not a medical doctor, but a doctor nonetheless. And she really was the sounding board, and the one that said to me, look, you gotta bring this up first. You gotta set the stage for, as a society and as a civilization, that this is where we start, really, with delayed gratification. The fact that now in 2024 we have, everything delivered even same day sometimes with Amazon, right? It's crazy. Who would have thought, me growing up as a kid in the 60s and 70s, that we would have this at our fingertips? It's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I think about Grubhub, right? If you want food, not only can you open your refrigerator, you could go onto an app and have it at your doorstep within 20 minutes. It's just outrageous.
Right, right.
Unbelievable. Well, great. Thank you for that. Moving forward to chapter 5, and kudos to your wife, by the way. Cultivating patience, the key to delayed gratification. If you could talk a bit more about patience and why it is so important, and then versus now, and the importance of now, and why patience is so important now.
Yeah, I think in life as a whole, patience is key to pretty much everything. And let's be honest. I mean, I have my moments where I'm impatient. I've made my mistakes where, well, I disclose this in the book. One of my worst mistakes, and certainly financially and just very poor decision making on my part where I broke my own rules of patience and delayed gratification, occurred about 20 years ago when I thought all of a sudden that I would become this real estate guru. And within a year, I acquired 20 properties that, literally 20 properties that were close to $500,000 each. And I couldn't maintain it. Couldn't maintain it. It was just such poor decision making. And again, my wife, who is my rock and my foundation, and has never rubbed my face in the ground. She kept telling me, bad mistake, don't do it, don't do it. And I did not pay attention to her. So that was the classic example of impatience on my part and wanting the instant gratification that I now kind of preach against. So I broke my own rules. I got burned. But after we got through that dark period in my life, my wife still propped me up. And again, her favorite expression is, okay, you've been dealt all these lemons. It's now your opportunity to make lemonade out of it. And I did. And after that, I learned. I embraced those failures. It took time. It didn't. I certainly didn't unravel that as quickly as I got into it. It took me much longer to unravel that over the years. And since then, I really buckled down, screwed my head on properly, and then truly I achieved much greater levels of success by patience, again, the perseverance that I talk about, the resilience, and the dedication to hard work. And that's that part of my life where, when we were talking earlier about not having time to do these other things, because at that point I buckled down, I realized that, look, there are no shortcuts to success. I'm going to have to buckle down. I gave it a try. I gave the instant gratification a try. I failed miserably at it. I'm now going to buckle down, and that's what I did. And then 20 years later, here we are, and I'm very proud of my ability to bounce back.
Yeah, that's incredible. How do we help our, you mentioned your kids earlier, that you talk to them and then they kind of go back to, I've, our kids are, what, 18 and 20, almost 22. So I see that as well on a daily basis. It's hard. That's, like you said, raising kids is the hardest thing in life. I believe that as well. But what can we do to help them? And how do we help ourselves from not always wanting to give to them? Because I know just in our household, it's challenging at times not to give in and want to give as much as we can, because maybe we didn't have that growing up. What advice do you have?
Well, I'll give you what little advice I can. If I had the magic words, it would be great. But I'm very humbled in saying that I'm still struggling with that. Early on, I think that perhaps maybe, I don't think we were ever super spoiling of our kids, but I think we did spoil them maybe a little bit. And it's hard to unravel that. Once you've already shown them the taste of being a little spoiled, it's hard going back. But I actually did kind of unravel things, especially with our older boy, who, we got him, or really I got him a car soon after turning 16, and wish I never had. And he took beautiful care of it. Kudos to him. Never got a ticket, and an accident, nothing. But it became his identity, and everything revolved around that car. So, a year or so later, I tried to prep him over about a 6-month period, saying, look, I'm sorry, but the car is going to go away. And I don't think he believed me. I kept telling him over and over, I'm telling you, the car is going to go away. And finally the car went away. And he couldn't believe it. So it's difficult, when you grow up as a child or a teenager in a somewhat privileged household. It's much different than me. I grew up with nothing. I was super happy
Yep.
having nothing because I didn't know any better. But the difficulty, for example, with our kids, all three of them, is that we kind of, fortunately and unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword, live in such a privileged life, and all their friends around them, in my opinion, my wife's opinion, they are spoiled. Their friends get everything. They get $100,000 cars. They get fancy clothes, fancy jewelry, purses if they're a girl. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, we've never gone to that extreme. And so now we're just trying to continually teach them and preach to them and say, look, I know your friends have this, but understand that you're not going to get this. And it's not because we don't love you. We love you. Your mother or I would gladly take a bullet for you if that's what had to happen. But we are not going to give you all these things for nothing. You have got to work hard, and you've got to make something of yourself. And we're here to catch you if you fall, perhaps, but we're not going to be providing all these things. And it's hard because, you love your family, you love your kids so much, you want to do everything for them. But if they don't learn to do things for themselves, if they don't learn to make those mistakes and learn from them, and embrace those failures, then they're not going to really achieve. And furthermore, if they really work hard and achieve something, it's going to mean so much more. It's going to mean exponentially more to them than just handing them something, which they'll appreciate. Just like when I bought the car to, at the time, our 16-year-old, he appreciated it, took great care of it. But it's different when you earn it yourself with your own blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, that goes to your soul, to your heart. And so that's what we're trying to teach them. And it's difficult because, again, of all their surrounding friends. We're just, we can't pull away their friends. And it's not that their friends are bad kids. They're not. It's just that it's unbelievable. My wife and I are in awe as to how so many parents just give their kids so much.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. As much as I love our kids, I cannot give them all these material things. I'm just not willing to.
Yeah. No, look, and we're trying to figure it out too, but I think you covered this very, very well. And I think this, that explanation will help a lot of people. I know it helped me. But to your point about earning it themselves, both of our kids, we've always enforced them to work and also, do as well as you can in school. And we are seeing some of that fruit bear. For example, I could think of one example where our son bought himself a designer wallet, where I would never buy myself a designer wallet like that. He wanted it, but he takes such good care of it. But he bought it himself. So he earned that money. Maybe not the best choice to pay that much money for a wallet, but I do see the level of care. So to your point, if it was gifted to him, he may not take the same level of pride or responsibility in maintaining, and he even has one of those tags in there in case it ever got lost. He could track it, right? So
Right.
but yeah, it's tough today. And I really wanted to touch on that topic because so many parents like us are going through this right now.
Yes, I sincerely, Roger, I wish I could tell you I had the answers. And the honest truth is I don't have the exact answers. It's a continuous struggle. Um, and all we can do as parents is just do our best, um, you know, give our children the support that they need, but really let them become independent, make their own decisions, as you say, work hard. And our eldest, yeah, whenever he's home from college, he works his butt off. I mean, he works at a restaurant, and he is a great worker. He actually enjoys working. Um, and I think that there's a side to him that would think, "Oh gosh, I could just do this. Why go to college?" But
Right.
the reality, I say to him, "Hey, that it seems like a lot of money right now,
Yeah.
but long term, you're not going to be able to survive on this."
Yeah.
But he enjoys working, and and he's trying to save up, et cetera. So kudos to him. He's a great boy, and I love him dearly. But his circle of friends, and it's true for all three of our kids, their circle of friends are basically somewhat spoiled.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's a great segue. I want to go back to the book. I highlighted chapter 11, which is mastering the art of wise saving and prudent investing. Um, so maybe kind of stay on that same time frame with, the youngsters, and then how adults could also learn from this.
Yeah, it's a very relevant topic, and myself growing up, my parents, and particularly my father, who took the traditional paternal role in an immigrant family, he would always preach about saving and not buying anything unless you had the cash, right? He was the traditional immigrant who pays cash for everything, doesn't want debt on a credit card or a loan or anything. And I always had that in the back of my mind. I must say, I didn't throughout my life, I didn't exercise it to the degree that he did as an immigrant. So, so as I've gotten older, and again, keep in mind, I unfortunately never took a business class, an investing class, none of these types of classes during my life, which I regret. That's one thing I would have done differently in college. Um, but I think saving, I try and preach to the kids that, especially our oldest who's working, he has his paycheck set up so that he gets a certain percentage. I don't know if it's 10 or 20% that he has directed into a savings account that he doesn't even see that money.
Great.
Um, I'm trying to teach them to set up early on in your life retirement accounts like an IRA or a Roth IRA, because just small amounts going in there now,
Yeah.
the
Compound.
power of the power of compounding, which is
Yes.
a difficult thing to understand when you're a kid, is massive if you start early. You
Yeah.
start at my age, you're kind of screwed.
Right.
So these are things that I didn't fully understand. I understood it a little bit, but I wasn't the best role model in my early years. Of course, I didn't have kids, but I'm trying to teach them that now to really make wise decisions, to get them set up with certain investment vehicles. Um, but I still think that they oversimplify things. They think, oh, well, we're going to invest in this and going to make lots of money, and it's not quite that simple. Investments, as we all know, come with risks, and sometimes the market is positive, sometimes it's negative, and it's up and down. So it's not that simple a thing to do. But I think the more you can teach your kids early on, the better. My father just taught me the basics, but he didn't really have investments the way we think of it now. Like, he didn't have stocks and things like that. He didn't, my
Sure.
parents didn't have a lot of money as immigrants, so they weren't investing. They were just basically saving and then making major purchases. If you needed to buy a refrigerator, you'd save up, buy it cash. You needed to buy a car, you'd save up, buy it cash. I mean, that's just the way they were. They didn't take loans.
Yeah. And how about for folks that are, midlife, right? 40s, 50s, 60s, that haven't made the best decisions? Any advice for those people on what they could do in the here and now?
Well, I mean, certainly in the 40s, it's still not too late in my opinion. I'm no financial advisor, but in
Right.
my opinion, it's not too late to start investments. I think perhaps conservative investments, as I've learned and read a little bit here in the more recent years, things like low cost index funds, staying away, I think, perhaps from mutual funds, which there's a lot of fees that go into that, but you can go to just an index fund to follow particular indices like the S&P 500 or what have you, and the cost, the fees associated with that are nil. You're still subject to the risk of the stock market, but you can also get an index fund for bonds if you wanted to. But I think just saving, not taking an unnecessary risk. Certainly, as we get older, we may get tempted to make up for time by taking unnecessary risk. But boy, then if we get burned, I mean, you might get lucky and it may pay off, but if you get burned, then you really put yourself in a hole. And the other thing, talking about finances and investment, and this is a subject that comes up here in our household, and I have my own personal biases, and that's the following. So oftentimes our boys will comment on, hey, let's use some of their the money that they will quote inherit, assuming there's money left over, inherit someday, is to basically invest in them in terms of starting a business or something of that nature, right? And my wife and I are adamantly opposed to that. I mean, we're adamantly opposed to having business with family members, because when things go wrong, and I have personal experience with this. I invested heavily, well, this is probably 30 years ago, in a hedge fund that one of my close family members started a hedge fund. And it did great the first year, it like doubled. And then the second year it tanked and went to zero.
Ooh.
And that's okay. I mean, I knew that I was taking a risk, but I think, unfortunately, for my family member that I invested with, I think he probably took it kind of personally and created kind of a riff, I think, between us. Not because I'm upset. It was my fault. I mean, I don't blame him. But it was just a very awkward thing. And so I think investing with close family members is not wise, in my opinion. And I certainly, and certainly not at this stage of my life, when I'm getting close to those years where I'm perhaps not going to be generating income, that it's not my role to fund some sort of business for my kids, and they don't have any business experience. They're just young and naive, right? They have glorious ideas, but then if that business goes belly up, then we've all lost. I mean, I've lost my investment. And it goes back to the whole issue we talked about earlier, that if they start their own business and put their own sweat equity and their own money into it, then it hits home. I mean, they're gonna nurture that business more than anything. If it's putting my money into it, yeah, they're going to try to make the business successful, but if it doesn't work, hey, it's not their money. So no, we're not, our opinion, and I know there's so many families out there that do help their kids get started in business and fund them to start a business, and that's okay. I respect that, but that's just, my wife and I, we're simpatico on that. We're completely on the same page, which I'm happy about, because we're just not willing to do that. We just don't think it's good for the child, and we're not willing to take the risk for our own pocketbook.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. It really does. Folks, grab a copy of this book, The Power of Pause by Dr. Justo. Wonderful, beautiful book, came out, incredible, and it's an incredible read. Before I let you go, a couple quick questions. How can people reach you if they're interested in either following you or learning more? I know you have a website if you want to give that as well.
Yeah, so my personal website, of course, I have the practice website, but my personal website is dremiliojusto.com, and that's spelled DREMILIO DrEmilioJusto.com, DrEmilioJusto.com. And then on that website, there are links to all the various social media handles there. There's a link to purchasing the book, which is on Amazon. There's links to the TEDx talks and so much more. I mean, I have a lot of media articles that are there. So by all means, you can also contact me directly through the website, and I'll get an email, and we'll be able to have a conversation set up, a go-to-meeting. There's a calendar scheduler there on the website as well. So happy to speak with any of the viewers out there and share my insights. And again, thank you, Roger, for all your support. Certainly, you're just a treasure trove of information, and certainly would recommend you to any prospective new client, because I really think the world of you and your team.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And before I let you go, last question I ask every guest. At the end of the day, you still have a lot of life to live, a lot of things to do, but you mentioned the word legacy earlier. What do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. Great question. I think my legacy is that I just want to be remembered as someone who, A, did their best, B, always treated everyone with dignity, respect, as I would want to be treated myself, including my patients. I try to treat every one of my patients as if they're my family. Want to be remembered as just very hardworking, very loyal, as a proud husband and father to our children. And lastly, I'm as a normal human being. I'm not perfect. I've never claimed to be perfect. I have my flaws, but I know that I've always tried my best. I've tried to be a good person. I continue to do that every day, and hopefully I'll be rewarded in heaven someday.
Awesome. Dr. Emilio Justo, welcome to the American Real family. Best-selling author of The Power of Pause. Congratulations on that. And cannot wait to air this episode.
Thank you so much, Roger. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to American Real. For more stories like this one, be sure to stop by AmericanReal.tv. Follow us on all social media to stay up to date with everything American Real. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and contact one of our publishing experts if you're ready to publish your book and become a best-selling author.